June 28, 1996. The time is 14:37. We're flying at 400 feet, about 70 knots. We're just flying south along Plage de l'Ouest, just south of Îles du Meules. And we're on the west coast of the Madeleine Islands. This is the section along the Tombolo, the west shore, where a lot of the oil bags were deposited in 1970 when the Irving Whale sank. Right now, it's you can see in the foreground the inner bar. There's actually a second bar just where the waves are breaking in the foreground, and those are welded on shore at several places. Low tide is just about now, actually. We'll just cut across the beach right now, and what you're going to be able to see is a cross section going from seaward to the lagoon side. You see the inner bar just almost connected or welded to the beach berm, the sand ramp in front of the fore dune, and then a higher primary dune. Then in the back is the stabilized wetland, and then the lagoon itself. And then turning and looking seaward, we're getting a view of the backside of the main fore dune. There's moderate, dense coverage of marram grass, and the darker grass in the foreground is juncas and more of the wetland vegetation. Now you get a view looking farther south. And you'll just pick up the two bars, one at the beach, one where the waves are breaking, and then there's another one a little bit further off. You might just barely make it out on the video, and then another one even farther offshore by another half a kilometer. The time is 14:39 for that transect. Moving south towards the wider part of the Dune de l'Ouest. Time is 14:40. We're again still flying at 300 feet, and the dune here, as you can see, is less scarped at the front. It's intermittent scarping, more at the blowouts. There's much more new vegetation is developed along the front of the fore dune. The beach itself is a bit wider, it's windswept, and now we're getting into a series of wave washover channels. The relief in the washover channels is probably 3-4 meters along the edge of the dune, and they extend right back to the lagoon. The width of these blowout channels is probably 50 meters. There's a stake in there for scale. We're looking right down now. See several of the bars are welded right on shore to form quite a wide beach in places. They're actually submerged at high tide. The tidal range here is about a meter. and low tide is at 14:30. The time now is 14:41. And we'll be just coming up on the wide, broad overwash plain sand flat that has cut through the dune complex on Plage de l'Ouest. There's one of the larger blowouts, and there's sort of a parabolic, almost a parabolic dune structure where the blowout is. On the seaward side, the fore-dune is more or less linear, but it's broken up. And as you get to the end here, you see the recurves and the old dune ridges with the blowouts curving landward. And then we'll just make a cut across. The beach at 14:42. And in the cross section, you get the waves breaking on the two bars, the crescentic beach front, the berm, and the windswept back beach. And you get the fore-dune, and then behind that are several irregular dune ridges, and then the darker color green, which is the more stabilized or wetland vegetation, where the water table is closer to the surface, and then the lagoon itself. As we swing around looking at the sand flat, there is dune ridges running at a diagonal down the axis of the blowout, and with the dry sand. There's only a couple with a little bit of vegetation, so they're quite mobile, and they're probably overwashed during major storms. As we go across the blowout, you can just see in the distance the end of the Dune de l'Ouest, or the Plage de l'Ouest, and the Havre Aubert, the Îles de Havre Aubert. There you get a good view of the dune complex, or the bar complex. The time as we come out is 14:43, heading southward. The two outer bars are much longer wavelength. They're partially crescentic to linear. The inner two bars, there are actually two of them here, are more of a transverse or very irregular crescentic bar. And as you can see, the bars are being welded on shore, forming a crescentic beach. The height of the dune as we rejoin the main fore-dune is probably maybe 3 meters. And in places you'll see new vegetation along the front of the old dune scarp. The actual dune here is only tens of meters wide back to the lagoon. Moving down closer to Îles de Havre Aubert, we start to pick up ponds in the backshore, fresh water, some older dune, stabilized dune in the backshore. And then as we get to the main fore-dune, there is moderately dense verum, vermiculata. And then in the front of the dune, there is less of a scarp along this section, and more new vegetation growth along the seaward side. There's some sand ramping or aeolian deposits up the seaward side of the fore-dune here, where it's scarp more. And the beach itself has a bit more coarse material in it. We're picking up a bit of pebble, people in there for scale. There's a well-developed berm with a wet area behind, sort of a runnel in behind the berm. And then the seaward side of the beach is a cuspate. And again, it's in conjunction with the nearshore bars that are being welded on shore today. The conditions are very light winds with sunny conditions, waves moderate to very low. less than a meter high. We come on to Havre Aubert. We're starting to pick up the bedrock coast. And here we've got a sandbar that actually runs along the seaward side of the cliffs. The time right now is 14:46. And there's a bar on the seaward side. Then as you're getting close to the cliff, you switch to pockets of sand and then pocket beaches in places with the sheer rock cliffs and rock stacks in behind. We're flying at 400 feet, 60 knots, and you're just picking up the different bedrock lithologies, sandstones, and some of the volcanic rocks from the central part of the island. Just offshore of the main cliff, there's some pocket sand and bar features. The beach itself is very narrow. There's some undercutting of the rock cliff, caverns, and there's a bedrock terrace extending offshore, and in the near shore it's a bedrock terrace with strips or stringers of sand and just a bit of cobble and boulder material right near the base of the cliffs. Coming around the southwest corner of Pointe de l'Ouest towards Cap de Sud-West. We're just passing there now into Anse à la Cabane, and we're going along the south shore of Îles de la Madeleine. Again, you've got primarily rock cliffs, a lot of bird colonies, lobster traps in the offshore area. There's caving at the base of the seaward side of the rocks. As we get closer to the harbor at Meules, we are seeing a sandy, fringy beach at the base of a cliff, which is consisting of unconsolidated sediment or till. And as the beach it narrows towards the outer edge of the breakwater, there's a bar extending around the edge of the armor stone, and sediment is accumulating, forming a wider beach at the east end of the structure. Cap de Sud and Anse à la Cabane, we head towards Cap Percé, a beautiful setting with the lighthouse and the sandstone bedrock. The rock structure extends offshore. There's caving. The relief of the cliffs is about 20 to 30 meters, I would guess. There's bedrock exposures running parallel to shore, offshore, with sand pockets in between. We're just starting to pick up some of the pocket beaches. They include both bedrock ramping in some directions as well as cobble boulder material. The back shore is bedrock and some unconsolidated sediment at the top. See how those are aligned to the west because of the more dominant wave energy on the west side of the island versus the east. We're just near low tide right now at 12:30. Time is 14:51, and we're just leaving the rocky part and joining Le Bassin or Anse de Bassin, the beach there that extends out towards Sandy Hook. Time is 14:51, and we're flying at 300 feet at 60 knots. You can see here where the beach joins the bedrock. There's quite a bit of sand just in the near shore. There's at least two sandbars. The inner one is more crescentic and not as irregular as some of the ones we saw on the west shore. There's an outer bar that's less continuous, and then an inner one, and then one with transverse bars that extend and almost weld right on shore. The dune here is much more regular, linear feature. We're going across Anse du Bassin, and again, there's much more loose, mobile sand here. Very little marum on the foredune, except on the backside. The front side has been eroded and escarped. There's a wide, dry sand area, and then at low tide, there are bars that are welded on shore. We'll just cut across and get a profile view of the barrier, and the time is 14:52. We're just cutting across. Get a good view now of the profile of the beach. We'll pick up an outer bar, which is more or less linear, straight, with some crescenting at either end of the beach. Then we pick up the transverse bars that are almost welded on top of the beach. A very narrow sub-aerial beach, fronted by aeolian deposits in the front of the sand dune, and we come across the partially vegetated marum part of the dune, and then the wetland vegetation by the lagoon shore. As we circle around and look back, we're actually just at the inlet that leads to Le Bassin, and we're just at 400 feet. Time is 14:53. Looking down at the inlet, you see the large flood tidal deposits on the and the people in there with a boat for scale. The tidal channel bifurcates on the landward side of the barrier, and the main channel leads out where there's ebb shield, a smaller one, and several bars, transverse bars linked to the shore. We'll cut across the inlet for Le Bassin. And we're just heading out now to 14:54, leading Le Bassin. As we come on to the next part of the dune structure, we find that it's again a linear foredune with some old, what looks to be little old washovers or secondary dunes on the backside. It's a much more continuous feature. There's less blowouts in the backside, and we're starting to pick up a lot of old beach ridges and dune complex at the far end of the beach. Just at the corner of Plage du Havre at 14:55, the outer bar is very linear and continuous, and then the inner bar is transverse bars with a smaller crescentic bar attached to the outer part. The beach is very wide where the bars are welded on shore. The actual beach is a cuspate, and we're just going to cut across. As we cut across the beach, you can pick up maybe the outer bar. It doesn't have any waves breaking on it. Then the inner transverse bars, the rips that are coming out between the bars. They're very wide, loose, mobile, medium sand beach with a very tenuous or very narrow foredune backed by some marum, and then all of a sudden you're into more wetland vegetation. In a series, we're cutting across a series of beach ridges or dune ridges that have accreted at the end of this part of the beach. And then we get into wetland topography and the much older beach complex. As we swing around and look to the east along the Dune de Sandy Hook, or further towards the old airport, abandoned airport, we're starting to pick up a little bit more old blowouts in the dune ridges. Those are the light areas. And there's some bush or stabilized vegetation, older fixed dune vegetation, into wetland vegetation, and some small ponds in behind the main dune. As we come across the beach, you get the inner bar, you see the rips between the transverse bars, and then you pick up the second bar, just the shadow of it offshore. And then we'll head along. The time is 14:57, and we're at 300 feet. Swinging back in towards the beach. Coming around the corner by an abandoned airstrip. On the backside is Îles de Have Aubert and the Pointe Fox, and we'll be heading on to Sandy Hook in a minute. In the foreground, the foredune is increased in elevation. It's more cut by dunes and walking trails. You see a boardwalk cutting through there, a wooden one. And then all along here, there's walking trails that cut through the beach. The beach is much wider and much more popular, as you can see. The foredune is broken by the walking trails. And then as you come seaward, there's some sea kayaks. The inner bar is pretty well joined the beach. And then the other one is farther offshore. It has breaks in it where the rips are cutting through it. The back behind the main foredune is some older mounds of sand, probably old washover or dune topography. And it has marum grass, and then the darker area is more of a wetland, or the water table is close to the surface. Going along Sandy Hook, the cuspate nature, the cuts in the foredune. There's a really large washover that's cut right through the foredune, and there's a whole series of them now. They're cutting through. The relief for the foredune is probably 10 meters. You can see the wind blowing sand come on up along, forming a ramp along the base of the foredune. The darker sand is wind blowing wet area. And then as we come across, you're picking up in the foreground the low tide area. We're just at low tide now, and we're cutting across one of the blowouts. You see the different vegetation patterns on the back of the dune. And as we reach the other side of Sandy Hook, we'll keep going farther offshore, and you can see the There's a whole series of linear bars farther offshore, and the inner part has a sort of diagonal bars. The time is 15:01, and we're just heading back across over to the south side of the island, across Sandy Hook. As we go across Sandy Hook, you'll see the variety of bars, the linear ones, and then you pick up the diagonal or transverse ones, or discontinuous bars, and the sand flat in the back of the main foredune has two main types of vegetation. There's some old blowouts that have been vegetated, and the foredune is pretty well continuous in places and then broken by these large washes. Then as we come out on the seaward side, we're picking up the two bars. They're concentric, but the wavelength is very, very long, and the inner bar is pretty well welded to the beach. Flying at just over 400 feet. It's 15:03. We're just coming to the end of Sandy Hook. As we get to the end, each one of these washover channels are getting progressively longer and wider. They cut right through the foredune. The dune on the south side is higher than the one on the north side, although most of the cars seem to be parked on the north side right now, or the eastern side, because that's where most of the people are playing in the shallower water. We come to the end, the foredune ends, and switch it into a sand flat, which is subject to aeolian transport across it. The sand waves are approximately 100-meter wavelength out at the end of the Sandy Hook. We've cut across the submerged part of Sandy Hook, and it continues out into La Paz, but we're right at low tide now. You can pick out the bar structure on both sides of Sandy Hook there now. There's the seaward, the two of them on the south side, and then the more irregular configuration on the east and north side. You can see how the dune also breaks up as you get closer to the end of Sandy Hook. It's 15:05, and we're just at 600 feet.